to the establishment people in the Herodian Sanhedrin. What they're doing here, and I think this is accurate now, is taking a temporary Nazarite oath. I think that, in fact, this is where the word Nazarene actually comes from. Nazarene, Nazarene, people who are Nazarite-minded people. This is a temporary Nazarite oath, the same kind of oath James sent Paul into the temple to take in the temple. This is more temporary even. This is a temporary, not a lifelong Nazaritism. So these are extremists, and I think they would want to kill Paul. As we say, there's a book, a version of Josephus, written by ascribed to the early church father Hippolytus. I don't know if it's authentic or not, from Josephus, but he says there were a group called the Sicarii Essenes. Now, Paul is asked if he is a Sicarii. He said, what distinguishes the Sicarii Essenes, which are the assassin terrorist Essenes, from the others, is that if they hear anyone talking about the law who was not circumcised, they will offer them the choice, circumcision or death. And they will kill anyone they see talking about the law who is not, in other words, who has not come into the covenant. So there are these extremist groups, of which I think we have here an example of one. I'm not saying they're right. Someone called me the other day and said, I've been out in Afghanistan, and I've read your James book, and that helps me understand completely what's going on with the Taliban and the extremist groups that I encountered. He was an army intelligence, he said, out in Afghanistan. And I can understand why, because what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan is very much like here in Palestine. The difference is that the Romans are us, and the extremist groups are like the extremist groups that we're seeing in these places, led by, a central figure who is considered totally righteous. Any case, this Hippolytus version of Josephus says that they will undergo any torture and any pain, even unto death, rather than eat things sacrificed to idols. Well, that's exactly what the James instructions are, not to eat things sacrificed to idols. So these Sicarii Essenes are distinguished by two things. They'll kill anyone who talks about the law. Why? Because if you're Aristotle or Socrates or Nero, you're not to talk about the law if you're not willing to come into the law first. Then you can discuss the law. That makes sense. I don't have a lot of right to talk about Thomas Jefferson if I'm a Taliban and I don't accept the American Constitution and Thomas Jefferson's view of things. I first have to come into America, accept the citizenship and the Constitution, and then argue the points about the Constitution with people, at least in the view, I think, of most of us would think. We're not going to kill someone who doesn't, but, in this part of the world, you do kill people that don't agree with you, unfortunately. Anyway, you can understand what their issue is here. So, who's protecting Paul at this point? The Romans. The Romans. Oh, that's very odd. Do you think the Romans would have protected Jesus? No, I don't think so. Do you think the Romans would have protected James? I don't think so. There's a reason they protect Paul. Oh, he's a Roman citizen. I think it goes deeper than that. I think he has contacts. And here's an example. We've never heard of this person, but suddenly Paul's nephew appears out of the blue, line 16. And he gets into the Roman garrison of the citadel in Jerusalem. The Roman administration is not in Jerusalem, it's down in Caesarea where Paul is sent. And he informs the centurion there of this plot. Line 21, 40 men have put themselves under a curse not to eat or drink until they have killed him. Later on, we're going to get mourners for the temple. It's in the Talmudic literature. Eating and drinking is a key thing all through the Gospels about Jesus, the Son of Man, came eating and drinking, opposing those who don't eat or drink. The mourners for the temple, it says, took an oath not to eat or drink until the temple was restored. I think they mean by that not to drink strong drink and not to eat meat. See, sometimes you have to interpret. They're not going to eat or drink and not to eat or drink till the temple is restored. They would starve and die of thirst. It's an extremist sort of a vegetarianism. I think James is a lifelong person of this kind. These things go much deeper than we can appreciate now. So I don't necessarily think that these people may have been fasting. I don't think so. I think it's that not eating flesh and not drinking strong drink. Anyway, the Son of Man was a wine bibber, the Gospels say. I don't think the Son of Man was a wine bibber. It's an attack on these kind of people, the not eating and drinking people. That's why the Son of Man is portrayed as a wine bibber, likes the company of prostitutes, likes the company of sinners, likes the company of tax collectors. Everything against what these people do. In other words, the Jesus of Scripture is the very opposite always of these people. Now, that may be accurate. And we like the Jesus of Scripture. You like the Jesus of Scripture, at least you're taught to, and usually people have affection to what they've been brought up to and are taught. But you have to decide if you think the Jesus of history really adopted the positions being presented, or is this polemics? Is this argument of one group with another? To my mind, what the Gospels are showing is a Messiah that is against the extremist groups. And you'll have to decide that. Anyway, Paul's nephew. We have a conversation, and he finds out he's a Roman, but he doesn't tell us the nephew's name. Why do you think it doesn't tell us the nephew's name? I think they probably knew who the nephew was. He's called, I think it says Paul's sister's son. Who's Paul's sister? Why weren't we introduced to her before? Who's her son? I think these are Herodians. And I have a genealogy at the back of my James book. And I base that on the point at the end of Romans where he speaks about his kinsman, the littlest Herod, and mentions some other people with Herodian names in those greetings to Rome, where all the Herodians have retired because of the trouble in Palestine. In any case, I identify who this nephew was in the Herodian genealogies and who Paul's sister was in the Herodian genealogies. You can look at the genealogies at the back of James and see. I didn't develop that myself. There's a Greek scholar in London who already told me those things and gave me those identifications. His name was Nikos Kokinos. He's well known at London University. He's written books on Herodian genealogies. And that was not an original point of mine to be able to go that far. I wasn't good on genealogy.